All right, well, it is, of course, Tuesday, and that means there's a bit of raising going on. And climate focused prop tech startup CIM, which stands for Continuous Intelligent Monitoring, has raised $10 million in a Series A. The round was led by 5V Capital and values the business at more than $100 million. The new funds will be used to expand CIM internationally into Asia and North America, as well as doubling the team over the next 12 months. Founder and CEO David Walsh joins me now to outline his plans. David, congrats. It always feels good to get a raise away, but there's a sense right now that it feels especially good to land one. Tell us about yours.
Yeah, thanks. The process of doing the raise was actually worked out pretty well. I know it has been a challenging time for some sets of some sets of technology companies to raise money at the moment. But look, we were quite focused on getting the right investors. So we'd been talking to these investors for quite some time, and thankfully, um, the whole process was relatively smooth in relation to getting the right sets of terms and getting the right sets of investors on board. And we now have enough petrol in the tank to take the business on to the next stage.
Say that you would have a reasonable amount of tailwinds in terms of getting efficiency out of property. Everyone is rethinking what it means to have this particular asset at this point in time as we go through this new hybrid work model. Tell us a little bit around the CIM story.
Yeah, so look, I mean, firstly, to touch on some of those headwinds that the industry is facing, and then in turn they become kind of tailwinds for us. So obviously, you have the work from home, but you also have rising energy costs, and all governments globally. The Australian government has had mandatory disclosure for nearly 12 years now, but that's kicking into the UK and into other regions. So they all put a lot of pressure on property owners and facility managers to really run a more efficient asset. So our technology quite simply helps the people that operate large, complex buildings to fix problems faster. And a good example of that is everybody's worked in an office that's either too hot or too cold, and it just really is a terrible experience. And that really is the tip of the iceberg for like the problems that we identify, because that hot or cold complaint is caused by a mechanical failure, or is caused by a control system not operating correctly, or alternatively a human jumping in and making changes they shouldn't. But the tip of the iceberg is really the tenant gets negatively affected. But the side and very important aspects to that is you use additional gas or you use additional energy and chiller energy. That negatively affects the environmental ratings. It increases the outgoings for the building. It creates an awful lot of wasted time by the facility manager having to talk to the contractors to kind of investigate the problem. And our technology does a thing called fault detection and diagnosis. So we're able to identify exactly what is causing that hot and cold complaint. And in turn, you then end up reducing tenant complaints, but you also improve the environmental ratings. You change the daily life of the facility manager. And the net impact for property owners is you run a more profitable fund or a more profitable asset. And in turn, the environment has less emissions.
Yeah, I've always wondered why in job interviews we don't ask what room temperature would you like if you come and work for us, just to sort that one out. But let's put that to one side. I was fascinated in the story we've done for startupdata.net. One of your clients, QIC, sort of talks about how they had a big problem with having scheduled maintenance all the time and how they're able to use your data in order to be able to preempt and deal with problems ahead of time. Just take us through what goes on for people who don't understand that kind of building management process.
Yeah, look, I mean, right now across Australia and all across the world, there are people tasked with going and doing a thing called planned maintenance. And they would go into plant rooms or into buildings and they would check 100 sensors. And what our technology does is, instead of the contractor having to check 100 sensors, we can identify the one faulty sensor and send the contractor directly to that faulty sensor. So it means it does a thing called data-driven maintenance. What that does is, for contractors, it means it's actually very, very frustrating for a contractor to go and do this planned maintenance, because contractors want to go and fix things when they get to a site. They don't want to go and check 99 sensors that are working perfectly. So what has surprised me about the technology is, yes, we designed it to really change the life for a facility manager and to take what was previously a very technical issue and make it simple. But the reaction from, let's say, the supply chain, being the mechanical, the air conditioning maintenance contractors, the building management system contractors, the plumbers for cooling towers, the reaction from that user group has been incredible, because they see it as a way to immediately fix no cost and low cost fixes, and then to identify things that are broken. And every property owner wants to fix things on their buildings that isn't working correctly.
Now, tell us a little bit about the plans for this 10 mil. I understand you are going to double the size of the business in terms of staffing, but you have these international ambitions. I can hear that you have a bit of a Melbourne accent there, so obviously you're going to Victoria.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've thankfully we've already, the technology has already been brought into new regions. So we already have clients in the US and in Singapore, and there's nobody on the ground in the sales and marketing team there. So I have 22 people in Europe. Again, we've been very fortunate in Europe to jump sectors into advanced manufacturing. So people like Intel, Dell, Johnson & Johnson, Seagate, they use our technology for the exact same use case, which is to help fix problems faster within their systems. But primarily, the first thing that we'll do with the technology is put people on the ground in the US and Singapore. The product works really well, and our product team is excellent. We've been very fortunate to be able to attract A-grade talent from places like Atlassian, Zero safety culture, really top talent, so which has allowed us to build a very stable and usable platform. So for us, it's about selling more of what we have on the back of the truck, getting into these new markets and really continuing the growth, so that we can, we're not trying to build a $100 million business. We're trying to build something many times the multiple of that.
Now, it's good to hear that a small startup might be doing a little bit of poaching from the big guys along the way. We normally hear the stories the other way around, so well done on that front. David, I do want to ask you, as an Irish tech entrepreneur, you went through the GFC, had, I understand, a bit of a torrid time. Here you are building that business, and I think you did it with starting with $1,300. I mean, geez, Mike and Scott had 10,000, so you did it for 13% of the money they had to build Atlassian. Let's see where you go from there. Tell us about how that shaped how you've built this business.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think any difficult experience, like, you know, thankfully I'd studied computer science and had my education, but like 2008, 2009 was a very, very difficult experience, and I had to actually arrive. I had to come to Australia with my wife Linda and the two kids, and we had $5,000, and we had to start again. And that was a very difficult time, to be straight. I didn't want to be a founder in a business. Like, I just wanted to get a job and build a career. But when I started working in the property sector, and I saw there was a gap with gathering the existing data set that was being produced by the plant and equipment and interrogating it with software, I was kind of compelled to kind of chase that and solve that problem with technology. Again, like anybody that goes through hard times, I think like the hard times tend to teach you more than the times when everything's going well. So I still use a lot of the learnings that I had during 2008, 2009, and 10 and 11 when we were getting set up here in Australia. But, you know, the property companies in Australia have been absolutely excellent to deal with. And I don't think big business here in Australia gets enough kudos for allowing tech businesses to, we did an awful lot of pilots. So clients like GPT, QIC, Charter Hall, Centre Group here in Australia, they have been great supporters of our technology in the sense that they've set the bar really high and they've pushed us quite hard to deliver results. But that has meant that we've been able to go overseas and really impress international property owners with what we've built.
And tell us about those collaborations, because it's not just some of the biggest property companies here in Australia, and I understand you've got a new deal up at the moment with Australia's biggest property management group, but you've been working with organisations like the National Museum of Australia and all of these other really interesting government bodies as well.
Yeah, look, so I mean, the facility management groups really see our technology as a tool in the toolbox to deliver more value to the property owners. And it really does help them to, culturally, it's very, very difficult for a facility manager to try and respond to these hot and cold and technical complaints, because facility managers, lots of them are very, very technical, but in many cases, they don't have experience in mechanical or electrical engineering. The good facility managers tend to be very good at engaging with the tenants, running the raffles and responding to tenant issues. So the fact that our technology can bridge that technical gap and allow them to focus on the front of house issues, it means that the likes of CBRE, Knight Frank, JLL, Cushman Wakefield, they are responding incredibly positively globally to our technology. And that's a really good path for us. That partnership path is really a key step in our growth. But then you have assets like Melbourne Museum, for example, or the National Library. Like these assets with the Melbourne Museum, it's the largest museum in the Southern Hemisphere, and it's not just hot and cold issues that they have to deal with. They also have to deal with a thing called relative humidity, which is the amount of moisture in the air, because they have to protect precious artifacts. And if there's not enough moisture, then the artifacts get brittle and they break. And if there's too much, they develop mold. So they have to maintain a band of moisture in the air. And that can be very complex for the on-site teams. And our technology has really helped, in particular, like the Melbourne Museum, who's on the platform for nearly 5 years, to run that asset at its peak performance.